You are listening to By the Book, because if you don't look at the world through the Bible, you will never see it right.
Welcome to By the Book. This is Alan Griffith, your host for episode 183. We have been talking about parenting, and we've spent a lot of time, a number of episodes, and we're not finished yet. I think we might have one more beyond this one. But in any event, I hope you are paying attention and evaluating your parenting if you are a parent, considering your children. And I don't mind spending a lot of time on this topic because I believe with all my heart, if we lose our children, we lose everything. We lose everything. I cannot imagine entering eternity without all of my children going to heaven with me. I can't imagine it. I cannot accept that possibility. And I'm grateful that my children are saved. But then there's the next generation. There's the grandchildren. And then there's the next generation, the great-grandchildren. And while I hope for the return of the Lord Jesus in my lifetime, I wish he would come today, I realize, and I'm sure you realize, that he may not come today. He may not come while we are still alive. And while it looks like we're in the end times, and I believe we are, yet God's timing is different than ours. And there might be a number of generations yet to be born. And you and I may be in heaven before those generations are born. But somehow, by God's grace, we have to have sufficient impact on our children that they will then have proper impact on their children and on down through the generations so that nobody is lost. I don't know how to emphasize that more than I do. Nobody can be lost. And again, I don't know your family situation at this point, but wherever we are, and we can't change the past, but wherever we are, we have to make every effort we can to live for Christ, impact our children, and then by God's grace, they be great parents to their children so that generation after generation can be called a godly seed, and everybody's going to be in heaven. I long for that. I hope you do. Now, here's the thing. There's a price to pay for that. It doesn't just happen. It doesn't just happen. There is parental responsibility that God has assigned to us. And you and I better take it seriously. And if by chance you're at a point where you look back, as I've had people say to me, I've mentioned it before, they wish they had heard some of these things a long time ago. Well, we are where we are. And it may be that you need to go back and apologize to your children and make things right and hopefully then have impact on your grandchildren and so on. I don't know where you are, but I know this, that whatever it takes, whatever we can do to see our children know the Lord and serve the Lord, we have to do that. We have to do it. We've been talking about some practical things. In our last episode, we closed with some practical challenges, and I'm going to get to some more of those in this episode. But I want to put some of these things into the biblical context of the New Testament. So I want to read to you from Ephesians chapter 6, beginning in verse 1. Here's what it says. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. I love to tell children there are some verses in the Bible just for them. And here's one. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. It goes on. Honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with thee, and thou mayest live long on the earth. So God is giving clear instruction to children to obey their parents, to honor their parents, to be respectful toward their parents, because therein is blessing for them. Now we come to verse 4, and I like to think of it this way, that the Apostle Paul and the Spirit of God through Paul is saying, I just told your children to obey you, and now I want to tell you something. And here's what he says in verse 4. And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. We need to nurture our children. We need to instruct them and teach them and bring them along in spiritual things. We need to admonish them. We need to put God's truth into their minds. But in trying to do those things, here's the warning that precedes it. Provoke not your children to wrath. Every dad needs to be a great dad. And moms have great obligation in parenting, but this is specifically given to fathers. Don't provoke your children to wrath. Don't do things that are going to cause your children to get angry at you and then perhaps to get angry at God, but rather carefully minister to them, carefully teach them, be faithful in your ministry to them. Fathers can provoke their children to wrath by being unfair. Sometimes fathers create bitterness in their children because a father acts in anger and is living in such a way that a child can't respect them. Well, those things are laid upon us as fathers, and we're told that don't you do that. Don't you be the one who causes your child to stumble spiritually. And that's what the warning is. That's what this is all about. Fathers should be the pathway to Christ, and sometimes fathers are the very ones who are in the way of their children coming to Christ. There's a similar statement over in Colossians chapter 3. It says in verse 20, children, obey your parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing unto the Lord. And verse 21 says, fathers, provoke not your children to anger, lest they be discouraged. Now, I'm reading from the King James Version of the Bible. That's the one I use. Sometimes our translators inserted some stuff into the text to try to give us a better understanding. Now, they always let us know if they are making an insertion to the text, and they do that here in verse 21, where it says, fathers, provoke not your children, and then the little phrase, to anger, is written in italics. And again, that's the translator's way of acknowledging to us that they put this in the text to try to clarify it. I don't think they did us any favor in this particular instance. Many times they do. But in verse 21, I want to read it without that little phrase. It says, children, obey your parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing unto the Lord. Fathers, provoke not your children, lest they be discouraged. So the warning here is not about anger or wrath. The warning here is that fathers must not discourage their children. And sometimes, again, fathers discourage their children because they are unfair in their handling of a child. Or sometimes a child feels that no matter what they do, no matter what effort they make, it's never good enough. The dad is never pleased. He never says good job. He never compliments, and so on. Those things are serious. Fathers have a great obligation in handling their children in the right way. So we've been making suggestions about that and trying to give some helpful ideas about that. And I want to continue doing that in this episode. So let me add this to the list of things we talked about in the last episode. I want to encourage you to not punish mistakes. Now, sometimes our children can make mistakes that can be very, very frustrating to us. But be glad that God doesn't punish our mistakes. Now, I don't know what your child's mistake might be. Could be something very, very serious. But I usually think of sitting at the dinner table and your child maybe reaches across to get something and he shouldn't be reaching, but he reaches and he knocks over a bowl or he knocks over a glass of iced tea or whatever it might be, and we can respond in anger and frustration, but we have to realize this: it was a mistake. Don't punish mistakes. Give children instructions so they know what they can do and can't do and what they can reach for and not reach for and those kinds of things. But if a child makes a mistake, don't punish them for that. Kind of coupled with that, but a little different, apologize when you fail your child. Apologize when you fail your child. We can fail our child in different ways. Sometimes we make promises and we don't fulfill them. We tell them we're going to go somewhere, we're going to take them somewhere, we're going to get something for them, and we don't do it. And sometimes maybe it's not our fault, but the child is hurt. And so there's great wisdom in going to a child and say, will you forgive me? I said we would do this and we could not do it. That's important. Or sometimes maybe we discipline the wrong child. Did you ever do that? I can remember doing that. I have one who seemed to get in trouble most of the time, and one time I was sure that child was the one who was doing the wrong thing, and I punished, and then another child came along and said it was me. Well, I had just punished the wrong child. Well, I want to tell you, I needed to apologize, and I did, and the child was very, very gracious about it. And at the same time, that's important. If we mess up, if we do the wrong thing, say the wrong thing, it's a good thing to go back to our child and make it right. We don't want them becoming bitter. We don't want them becoming angry. We don't want them discouraged by the way we treat them. Let me encourage you with this. Don't compare your child unfavorably with another child. Sometimes it might be your child's brother or sister, and it would not be unusual for a parent to say something like this: why can't you be like your brother? Well, that's a terrible thing to say. We want to handle that child on the basis of their ability and the things that they ought to do and all that goes into them being an individual. We don't want to compare them favorably or unfavorably. Just don't compare them. I can think of a couple. We have been involved in family camps for many, 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 many years. And I can think of a family that came to the family camp, and they were playing tennis, this one family. And I was simply observing at that point. But something came up where the parents just turned on this boy and started to compare him unfavorably with another boy who wasn't even part of the family. And, why can't you work harder? Why can't you do better? Why can't you practice more like so-and-so? And I want to tell you, I watched, realizing you're destroying him. You're destroying him. Encourage him to be what he can be and what he should be, but don't pit him against other children. Don't belittle your child. Don't call your child names. And sometimes people do that. They just want to put their child down. They call them names, you brat, you rat, you, I don't know what it might be, but don't do that. No favorites. No favorites. When the Bible talks about parents who had favorites, believe me, nothing good came of it. It's sad what happened with Joseph and his father having him as a favorite. His family, his brothers hated him for it, and there was a price to pay because his daddy had him as a favorite. Don't have any favorites among your children. Recognize that every child is different. Every child has their own personality. They have their own abilities, whether it be academically or athletically or whatever it might be. And it is important to recognize those simple truths. So let me get you to think about some of these things. Don't punish mistakes. Apologize if you fail your child. Don't compare your child unfavorably with another. Don't belittle your child. Don't call them names. Don't have any favorites. I can think usually, I guess it's the grandparents who seem to end up with favorites. Don't tolerate that in any way. And then recognize that every single child is different. So all of those things fit into this category of don't provoke your children. Don't provoke them to wrath. Don't provoke them so they end up discouraged. Parenting takes a whole lot of work, doesn't it? Parenting takes a whole lot of effort. But I want to tell you something. Nothing can be more important after your own salvation and your own marriage. Nothing more important than to win those children and to teach them and love them, see them come to Christ. What a very special, special blessing that is, but what an incredible obligation it is. Now, what I want to do is move a little bit and just talk to dads about their very, very special role. No doubt, mom has an important role in parenting. No doubt about that. But when I look at the scriptures, I see the challenge that is given over and over and over again to dad. And I think it would be worth our while to just spend a little time on that in this episode. So I have my Bible open to Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 20. And here's what it says. My son, keep thy father's commandment and forsake not the law of thy mother. Now, I'm not going to go too deeply into this, but I want you to just recognize that there is a distinction drawn in this verse between father and mother and the child's response. So the child is to keep the father's commandment, not forsake the law of the mother. Now, that term law, we'll see it elsewhere in a moment. That term law for mom is a term that means to kind of aim the finger. And it's mom, the idea of mom kind of pointing to the child, do this, put that there, put that over there, put that away, that kind of flavor. And that's mom. She has her rules for that house and how things are supposed to be done. And the kids need to obey those rules. They need to obey those laws, if you will. And I always say smart dads will obey mom's rules and laws also. But there's a distinction between that and what we hear about the child's response to the father. Keep thy father's commandment. Now, what is a commandment? In the Bible, we think of the 10 Commandments typically, don't we? And there is God through Moses giving instructions on how people are supposed to live. What is acceptable, what is not, what is moral, what is not, what is good, what is not. And so you see those commandments: thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, and so on. So there's the setting of the rules for how life is to be lived. Well, now we come to the house, we come to the home. And here is what the child is told: keep thy father's commandment. Now, what's that mean? Well, I want to tell you, it means this. There has to be a father who is giving the commandment. Who is responsible to set the pattern for how we live in our home? Who is establishing the right and the wrong, the good and the bad, the moral, the immoral, whatever it might be? Well, that has to be Dad. Dad is the one who says, in this house, this is how we live. This is what we do. This is what we don't do. That's Dad's obligation. Many dads don't pay much attention to that, but that is an assignment of God to the father. Dad, get your house in order. Set the standards by which your family is going to live. Now, if I go back to Proverbs chapter 1, I want to read from verse 8. And here it says, my son, hear the instruction of thy father. And then the follow-up, and forsake not the law of thy mother. So here's the law of mom mentioned again, and that's a great emphasis of mom's responsibility. But now, having said something about the commandment of the father back there in chapter 6, here we are reading, my son, hear the instruction of thy father. Now that term instruction is elsewhere rendered correction, has to do with discipline. Dad, that's your role. Dad should be the one who is correcting the child, setting the standards for when there ought to be correction. Dad is the one who is responsible for the discipline of the child. And that is when things go wrong, but it's also just generally speaking, the training of the child. So much of that is assigned to the father in the Bible, but so many times men don't get it. They don't pay attention. They think, I have to go to work, I have to do whatever I have to do, and my wife has to take care of the home. Listen, your wife should take care of the home under your leadership. You set the standards that are to be followed, whether you are home or not. You set the rules. You let everybody know this is how we live. That's Dad's job. Now here I am in Proverbs chapter 4. Let me spend just a few moments here. Verse 1 says, hear ye children the instruction of a father, and attend to know understanding. So that's the challenge for the child. Pay attention to what your dad says. Listen to his instruction. Now listen, verse 2, this is a father who is speaking to his son, and he says this, I give you good doctrine, forsake ye not my law. So sometimes Dad has his laws, his rules, but the challenge early on in verse 2 is this, I give you good doctrine. Now I love that thought. That is a dad speaking to his child and saying, I am your teacher. I am your teacher. Well, what does Dad teach? Well, we usually think of doctrine in terms of biblical truth and spiritual things, and that's certainly to be included. Dad, you are the teacher. You are held accountable for teaching your child spiritual things. And their learning of spiritual things cannot simply fall back on a Sunday school teacher or a youth leader or the pastor. That's your job, Dad. I don't find enough fathers who are teaching their children biblical truth. And it doesn't have to be a classroom setting in your living room. It's in the midst of life. As you walk through life, you're taking the opportunity to teach your children spiritual things. But the doctrine here is not limited to spiritual things. It's life in general. Who is teaching the child? Now, again, the child is being told to listen. Well, the child has to have something to listen to. So who is teaching a child manners, for instance, courtesy, respect, how to carry on a conversation, say, with an adult, why to open a door for a lady, how to handle problems when they come up with other kids, or how to respond to the discipline of another teacher, or how to hold a fork, or how to tie a tie, how to mow the grass, whatever it might be. Dad is supposed to be the teacher. Dad, take on that responsibility. Now, this dad in Proverbs 4:2 says to his son, I give you good doctrine. Now, listen to what else he says in verse 3. He says, for I was my father's son, tender and only beloved in the sight of my mother. Now, I want you to see this. I want you to see the generational experience here. This is what's supposed to happen. The child is told to listen to his father. The father says, I give you good doctrine because I was my father's son and he taught me. That's what verse 4 says. He taught me also and said unto me, let thine heart retain my words, keep my commandments, and live. I want to tell you, that's a wonderful picture. That's a wonderful picture of a grandfather, a father, and a grandson. 3 generations where there has been this pattern of teaching and instruction. That's what's supposed to happen in our family. In verse 5, it says to the child, get wisdom, get understanding, forget it not, neither decline from the words of my mouth. That's a great dad. That's a great dad who takes the time to sit down with his child and basically say, I'm going to teach you wisdom. What's wisdom? Wisdom is the ability to see things right. And that's what dads are supposed to do. Dads are supposed to be able to renew their child's perspective. Sometimes things go wrong in a kid's life, don't they? They can be treated unfairly by a teacher, or they don't win the game, or whatever it might be. Somewhere where the child is going to get discouraged and he needs to get his perspective back. He needs to get back on track. Who does that for a child? Well, that's supposed to be dad. Get wisdom, verse 5 says. Get understanding. Forget it not. Neither decline from the words of my mouth. That's dad. What a responsibility a father has. We're going to come back. One more episode. We're going to invest in parenting with special emphasis on dad and his obligations. There might not be a dad in your family. We will make some reference to that in our next episode as well. Lord bless you. Until next time.